Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. On today's video, I'm replacing the coolant hardpipe on a MK4 1.8t. The pipe starts right by where the thermostat is, runs along the front of the engine, connects to some hoses, and then runs to the back of the engine to the heater hoses. This job isn't necessarily complicated, it's more about getting everything out of the way so you can access the pipe and then pull it out of the engine bay. This video should be a huge help if you're going to replace this part. The whole reason I started looking into this is because of this little coolant drip here, and it turned out it was actually from the thermostat housing and not the coolant hardpipe, but as you can see, the hardpipe is really corroded and rusted, and it's in the same area as the thermostat housing, so I figured while I was in there and taking it all apart anyway, I wanted to cover my bases and replace it. If you are interested in replacing the thermostat in the housing, I have a great video for that linked here and in the description. If you're in here doing the hardpipe, I highly recommend doing those two items as just preventative maintenance. If you don't know how old they are or the condition they're in, just throw new ones on there because you're in there anyway. Start by getting underneath the car and drain your radiator. Open up that valve, let it drain, go back up top and open up the cap to the overflow bottle. That way the air will force the rest of the coolant out. You'll still have some in the system, especially in that area by the thermostat and the hardpipe, but this will get rid of most of it, and you can squeeze some hoses or pressurize it if you really want to drain it all out. And now I'll cover all the tools you need because you can gather those while you're waiting for the coolant to drain out. So we've got 10, 13, 16 mil sockets, an extension, 6 and 8 mil Allens. I definitely suggest getting the ball head Allens. They just provide that extra reach and angle to get in there. A ratchet, a cable hose clamp plier, vice grips, and a torque wrench. First things first, these EGR lines have to go, so start by removing those two 10 mil nuts that hold the SAI lines, and then remove the bolts holding the bracket to the intake manifold. Once those bolts are out, there are 4 vacuum lines holding this thing to the engine still. 2 on the right side of that plate, 1 by the fuel rail, and then 1 underneath the intake manifold. Once those are disconnected, move on to your N249 valve, which is underneath the plate, unplug it, and then you can take this whole plate and the mess of EGR lines and just put it aside for the time being. You want to remove your dipstick and dipstick tube. They're just going to be in the way and it's easier to get them out. Once they're out, you want to cover that hole with a Ziploc bag. I originally shoved a piece of paper towel in there, but during this work you can get coolant drips and spills, so you don't really want to risk that getting into your oil pan. Just seal it off with a Ziploc bag and rubber band. Now starts the real process of gaining access to that pipe. Everything I'm about to do is in no particular order, so it's just how I did it and you can follow it from there. The first thing I'm taking out is this lower PCV line that runs from top of the engine to the bottom. It's really easy to take out and it's just kind of in your way, so you might as well. One of my first videos was actually about replacing these, so if you have any questions, just leave a comment here or refer to that other video. Despite what the Bentley manual says, there are actually 2 bolts holding the hard pipe to the block itself. One of those is located underneath this bracket, the other one is located on the side of the engine, and I've got the coolant hard pipe off so I can better illustrate that for you guys because you can't really see it when it's all on the car. This front one is the one I just told you about, under that bracket. The one on the side is the one that I didn't know existed until the pipe wouldn't come out of the car, so just be aware that that one is there and you do have to remove it in order to remove that pipe. Onto the coolant hoses that are connected to the hard pipe. You've got this first one here underneath the intake manifold. You can see it plain as day, right next to the thermostat housing, really easy to get at. Moving down and around, you've got this line coming from the oil cooler. Again, not too bad to get at. Underneath the coolant temp sensor, you've got this line that terminates into the hard pipe, and then further back, it runs all the way and ends at the heater core lines. That one is not so easy to see or get at, and I'll talk about that next. The best way I found to access the hose clamp that holds the hose to the hardpipe is to go from the passenger side rear with a pair of cable hose clamp pliers. If you try to go from the driver's side where the hardpipe is, there is not enough room, you'll never access it with anything, so this seemed to be clear access and was the easiest way that I found. The next 2 items I'm about to cover, I'm not sure if you have to remove them, but it seemed like the hardpipe was getting hung up on them, and once I did disconnect them, the hardpipe came right out. So I'm going to go with that you have to do it. If you know of a better way or a different way, please comment and let me know. I removed this electrical connector first, and I'm not sure that I had to. I think it was actually just getting hung up on the oil line, so if I were you, I would remove the oil line first, and then come back and remove this if your hardpipe still isn't coming out. Now onto the oil feed line. The first thing I disconnected was the banjo bolt going into the oil filter housing, and for me, that was the worst part of the whole process. With it being an Allen head bolt and the AC line where it is kind of in the way, I came really close to stripping it out. Luckily, I was able to get it out cleanly, and the revised part from Volkswagen is actually a standard banjo bolt, so you can use something like a wrench on it, which is great for that tight clearance area. Once that's taken care of, you can remove the connector on top of the bracket on the oil filter housing, get that out of your way, and then you can remove the bracket itself, unbolt that, get that out of your way, and then the coolant hard pipe should come out of the car. The final detail I want to mention is removing that heater core hose from the hardpipe itself. I talked about the clamp earlier, but I didn't mention the detail about the hose. What I found worked best resulted in me essentially hugging the engine. I put my right hand on the hardpipe and my left hand on that heater hose and just pulled the two apart. Once those two are disconnected, it'll still take a little bit of work and finagling to get the pipe out. There's just a lot of parts in the area and a lot of weird bends in the pipe. Don't go yanking indiscriminately because then you can damage something else in the process, but just keep working at it and it'll come out eventually. Because I was in here replacing so many coolant related parts to begin with, I decided to replace the heater core hoses because they're original to the car. I figured why not. That process won't be included in this video, it'll be in my next video, so keep an eye out for that being posted on my channel or a link in the description of this video. Here's the new pipe installed. It's honestly easier going in than it is coming out because you kind of know what you're doing at this point, so it should go right in, and then it's time to tighten all the bolts down that hold it in and reconnect everything. Here you can see that new banjo bolt. This is a factory bolt from Volkswagen. It is a direct replacement for that one that I took out with the Allen head. It's a 16 mil bolt and it gets torqued to 22 foot-pounds. Next up are the two bolts that hold the bracket and the pipe to the block. These two bolts are probably the worst part of the whole installation, honestly. It's going to make you want to throw everything across the garage and just say forget it. It's just really hard to get a tool in there and get the angle of the bolts right and through everything and into the block. I definitely suggest using the ball head Allen. That's what I had the best luck with. It is going to take some time. It is really annoying, but just keep at it and you'll get it done. You can see how much I struggled here with it, and this is sped up footage, so just keep at it. You'll get it. As a bit of relief, the next piece goes in really easy. This thing just bolts right back up. You shouldn't have any problems. You can reach it with a tool, and there's only one thing you're going through, so no worries about cross-threading it or anything like that. The last bolt for the hard pipe on the side of the engine should be fairly easy. There's no place for this thing to go because it is a hard, solid pipe, so the holes should be lined up, and you can see the location of it because it's right by that port. You can pretty much get a tool in there and stuff if you've removed everything out of your way to access that side of the engine. So use that ball head Allen, give you that angle and that reach to get in there, and it should be a piece of cake. Now it's time to reconnect all your coolant hoses. I honestly suggest replacing as much as you can afford or want to. If you're doing all this work, the whole system is drained, you've got so much apart already, just go hog wild and replace everything you possibly can. I only replaced the hoses that interface directly with the coolant hard pipe. I figured if I'm taking them off the hard pipe, I'll just replace those. I honestly wish I had just replaced more. Learn from my mistake and just order everything that you possibly can to replace it while you're in here. The first set of hoses I'm doing here are the oil cooler hoses. They come as a bundle of two, so if you're doing one, you're doing both. You also can't really install these wrong, which is why I'm not really going in depth about this here. One goes from that junction on the upper hose down to the oil filter housing. The other one comes off the oil filter housing and goes back to a junction on the hard pipe. In keeping on the same side of the engine, the next hose I'm going to do is running from that coolant temp sensor junction back down to the hard pipe. Because of how tight this area was, I actually couldn't access the hose clamps with anything. Even those cable hose clamp pliers just didn't work, they were too big. I ended up using a set of vice grips and that worked great. If you do go that route with the spring clamps, don't hold it open all the way. I've seen it happen with older spring clamps or cheap new spring clamps that if you open it all the way and hold it there, it actually springs the metal too far and then it won't spring back and then your hose is going to leak. Moving your way back to the end of the hard pipe, you have to install your heater core hose. When I installed this, I actually had the turbo inlet pipe off the car, so that allowed me to get access from the front side. If you don't have your turbo inlet pipe off the car or don't want to remove it for this installation, which I don't really think is necessary, you can just go around the back side just like when we removed it. The last hose to install is along the front side of the hard pipe right next to the thermostat. That hose comes from the Y junction which goes to the coolant ball. I didn't actually remove any of this, I just disconnected it and kind of shoved it out of the way while I did the work, so if you have any questions about installing it, let me know, but it should be right there, and it should be the only thing that reaches that junction on the hard pipe. Once you've completed that, the hard work is really done. The hard pipe is installed, the hoses are connected, the only thing left to do is put everything else back. All the SAI lines, the EGR lines, anything else you removed to get at this stuff. I'm not going to cover any of that today because I think if you've made it this far, you don't need me to tell you how to put it all back together. If you do have any questions about those other incidental parts, leave a comment and I'll help you out. Once your car is back in running order, it's time to fill the system up with coolant and bleed it. I'm not going to be covering bleeding your cooling system in depth today. It's not really the point of this video. In basic terms, you let your car warm up in the driveway, keep adding coolant as the level goes down, And once the thermostat opens, make sure everything is running and not leaking. I will say that when I put everything back together and ran coolant through it, I didn't have any leaks. So, if you follow my video to a T, you should be good to go as well. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you do have any questions, please leave them below. I try to answer everyone's comments. Be sure to check out my previously posted video, which is the thermostat and housing install, and the next video I post after this will be the heater core hoses, so check that out as well. Thanks so much, everybody.